So, in the mid 19th century, Charles Dickens published A Christmas Carol. It's about a miser named Ebenezer Scrooge, we've all heard the name, who's visited by ghosts and changes his ways. A century later, Frank Capra directs a post war piece of Americana with Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed. This is a special request episode suggested by someone, someone anonymous. Perhaps an angel investor, perhaps just an angel, or a ghost of podcasts past, because we've got a lot of those too. Tonight, it's a very political film. It's an American film, one that you, Rick, said defined its decade, or one of the ones that defined its decade. It's a Wonderful Life.
You know, for a number of years, I had never seen this film in its completion. I had never sat down and watched it from beginning to end. I think I missed the opportunity when I was young, which is an amazing thing to do, seeing as how it went out of the copyright went out, and in the late '80s or the mid '80s and the early '90s, what that meant was it got snatched up by networks. And I remember a time where they were showing it like 24 hours a day. It was like a Christmas story at that time. They would show it at Christmas every day, all day long. It was a staple. And I guess when you hit people with something like that, there are those of us who say, well, it can't be any good. And it's probably overly sentimental, and it's obvious, or it doesn't speak to anything that I've experienced. Now, a lot of that is true. But as you watch It's a Wonderful Life, it's done with such a level of skill and honesty and honesty and sadness regarding the human experience that unless you're a really fucking stone, you got to be a fucking rock of emotions for this movie not to affect you, because it's about dreams and it's about the failure of life and how things don't always go. I mean, let's face it, things don't always go the way we think they're going to go, or the way we hope they're going to go, or the way that we plan that they're going to go when we're young men and young women. And you sink into the realities of life. When you look at George Bailey, you see every young man who dreams of getting away from where they come from, going off, experiencing adventures, making a name for themselves, and turning into the person that they believe that they should be. Life has a life has a different plan for us, I guess. I don't know. I don't I don't want to put too much into the aspect of fate, but it's readily apparent in this film. Um, and as a storytelling uh, aspect, you know, a movie can go against your attitudes and beliefs and still be a great thing. I will say this: watching It's a Wonderful Life again last night in preparation for this episode, it grabbed a hold of me. And maybe it's because of the age, maybe it's because of getting older and experiencing things and things not working out um, in in a way that I've mentioned numerous times on this podcast, and maybe it's becoming tired. But there's a reality to that. I find it difficult to imagine that there's anybody out there that doesn't connect with George Bailey. He is the everyman. He is all of us, regardless of race or creed or religion, or it's 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 the realities of everybody who wanted more, who settled for less, and realized that the less is better than we had any right to believe that it would be. I love this movie. And this movie is a film that is very much 1946, immediately post-war, immediately American, and beautifully optimistic, buried in a sea of darkness and sadness. But you definitely walk out of this movie, or get out of your lazy boy, or turn off the TV or whatever, with the sense that good is possible. There is good out there in this world. Maybe I'm a little bit too naive, maybe, which I don't understand how I could be, being as cynical as I am, but
Just
this film
you
does.
just saw Rocky. That's why. Prepped you for this shit.
Yeah, Rocky. It's kind of crazy that we've done three films that are on the surface incredibly unrealistic, but that there's a part of you that sells out to and wants to believe in and wants to believe are possible. And call it whatever you want to call it. There's a level of optimism that a film like this provides that helps you get through the bullshit. I can say that without reservation. So at this point, I'm glad that we're talking about this in the beginning of spring and not waiting around for Christmas, as a lot of, if people were going to talk about it, they would do that, because I've never felt this was a Christmas movie. It's a film that's set at Christmas at the end of it, but this is not a Christmas movie. This is really kind of an anti-Christmas movie, I think. This is one of the saddest, bleakest stories I've ever seen. And by the time you get your happy endings are usually undeserved. In this one, I think it's earned. I think it's set up beautifully. I think this is one of the greatest movies ever made. I love this film. I don't, I can't say that I think it's, if you were to read the story on paper, a review maybe, you would expect a cheap, maudlin, obvious attack on the emotions. And somehow this film gets around all that. It circumvents the obviousness of it. You can do something that is, by all definitions, easy, and still achieve something. And it's interesting. I'm glad you brought up Dickens' Christmas Carol, because it's a Christmas Carol if Bob Cratchit had given up. If that story was told from Bob Cratchit's perspective, and Scrooge beat him down to the point where he started to give up, that's a Christmas Carol. I'm really interested to know your opinion. I know we talked about it, but a second viewing a year later might bring a bit a deeper, better, or worse attitude regarding the film. So what's your take?
I mean, I have a lot of takes. It's interesting. When I told Leslie that we were gonna do it, she was like super on board. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously, like, we have to watch these fucking movies. So either like I'm figuring out a time to watch them on my own, or if it's like I'm like, hey, this is gonna really make you cry or disturb you, you should watch this with me, or whatever. Then but this one, she was like, yeah, like she's always trying to get me to watch it. Um,
Is it a little
and
bit too the way you say that? Is it a little bit too sentimental for you? Is it a little bit too obvious? What's
maybe,
yeah.
it's I think for my taste, it's not. I think sometimes I just want to, if I'm gonna sit and watch like a movie, sometimes I want to watch because there's stuff that we're watching because we're going to talk about it, and that's a different. It could be the same film, but if I'm sitting to watch whatever Scarface, if I'm watching it because I'm watching it because I want to watch it versus watching it because I do want to watch it, but we're going to talk about it. Those are two different approaches to the film that I'm going to take. Um, and so sometimes if I just want to like watch a movie, um, separate from a conversation or thinking about a conversation that we're going to have about it or looking at it through that lens, like maybe I want something that's a little bit more stimulating in a different way. Um, this is every film is stimulating. This stimulates the emotion, but maybe it just doesn't have enough severed heads or whatever. You know what I mean? Or the editing, or I want something that's a little bit more. Maybe I want something in Japanese. I don't know. But I think she's more up. Like she has like more of the like stuff on a rotation. Um,
Yeah.
and this is one that she wants to like. Oh, let's watch this, and maybe we don't put it on enough. Like that type of thing. Um, so she was like, "Yeah, cool, let's watch it like together." It's all right. And it's kind of like Mr. Rogers. It's like what you describe as this. It's like if you were to read it on paper, or someone to tell you, well,
Mm.
there was this show about, and if assuming that person didn't know, because I didn't grow up with Mr. Rogers.
But you were aware of
Um,
it.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
I knew that he existed.
Hmm.
And if you're like, well, there's this show about this guy who talks to the audience, and he gets home and he puts on a cardigan or whatever the fuck he does, and talks about like community and the importance of having those bonds with one's neighbor and blah blah blah. Um, just especially if like let's say you're telling someone about that in like a big city, or the picture you're telling someone that in New York, and they'd go, oh, fucking, oh please. Um, they would roll their eyes. Um, Maybe in a small town, you would say like, no shit, um, things that are taken for granted. Um, I don't know my fucking neighbors. Um, I know that they fucking steal my parking. I know that. I know their cars. I know where they're double parked. I know if I were to, well, I wouldn't do it, but if I were to decide to key their fucking car, I know what side of the car I would key. You know what I mean? Like, and I know what key I would use in those like parking revenge fantasies. Um, but do I know Mr. Rogers and the intricacies of his like shows and all that? No. Um, so it's one of those things that like the idea of it may seem a little bit kind of
Hmm.
to a more cynical city person or whatever. It may seem a little bit kind of like, yeah, sure, whatever. Um, but then when you see it and it's kind of like maybe to that person it's refreshing, or it's just kind of like, oh shit, like this is able. And Jimmy Stewart is like that. Like Mr. Rogers, he's able to achieve everything that's built into the messaging and the tone and the theme of that particular piece, whether it's Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or whether it's a Wonderful Life. He's able to, through his authenticity, through his honesty, through his sincerity, his earnestness, however you want to describe it, to where you believe, and then you can look out your window and say, okay, yeah, there's the asshole who fucking steals my parking, but there's also the person that's gonna fucking like, if my car isn't starting and I need to push it before the fucking street sweeper comes, there's that guy who's gonna fucking like, he's not gonna have an issue. He's on his way to work or whatever, but he'll stop and he'll help me push the car. Um, that guy is there too. So um, it is something that's interesting about this film is the kind of that tension between those two. Well, first of all, there's obviously the film is about perspective. It's about second chances, community, the often unseen positive effects that we have on the world and on on those around us. What would happen if the 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 central thing is like, well, I'm I'm worth more, George Bailey says, dead than alive. So, okay, Christmas Carol style, it's like, okay, now we're gonna fucking show you. Um, what would happen? What would the world look like without you in it? And you see the differences there, and then you can see, wow, oh shit, I did have this fucking impact. Wow, this, I did this, but I didn't even know that because it's all these secondary, tertiary effects that we're having because of the domino of our fucking, the domino effect, butterfly effect, whatever effect of our fucking lives. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we're over here flapping our wings on this podcast, and there's a fucking someone's laughing in fucking Beijing right now from last week's episode or whatever. Um, you know what I mean?
Well, of course.
So it's things you don't, we have no like awareness of. Um, you're at the store and you're rude to a person that could completely fucking like fuck up their whole day if they're there at work and their mom just died, but they had to go to work because they don't have the time off, and now you're just being an asshole because you're in a rush, and now it's like, oh great, like my mom just fucking died, and then now this, like whatever. Or the flip side, you can fucking you just say something, whatever, that's just offhanded, but it completely makes someone's day. It can completely do that, and it's like, oh shit, like this person today, when that person gets home, assuming they have a partner, and they get home and they tell you, tell your people your fucking day and blah blah blah, and then this person says, "Oh, I had a guy come into the whatever the shop or whatever, and he mentioned blah blah blah, and it was just really cool, and it's simple and it's free, but it's worth a lot." So there's all of that, which is just, that's one level of the film, but beyond that is that tension. What I was talking about with the theology of like the neighbors of the steal your parking space neighbor or help you push your car neighbor. The tension between kind of the idea of like Einstein saying, like asking, do you live in the question, the fundamental question or whatever the fuck he said or is supposed to have said, is like, do you live in a friendly universe? Is the universe friendly, or is it in that sense, like, is the universe a friendly, cooperative universe or a competitive one? And that goes into that tension, that dichotomy is set up throughout the film, and it's also set up, like, it's set up in society, but it's set up in the town, but it's set up in the family, but it's set up in the individual, and it's the obligations to society and family versus the individual dreams, desires, the idea of like the actualization of the self. This is what I want, this is what I need to do for my life in order to feel like I fulfilled my own life. But then it's, we all have these dreams, and then, well, what happens if you have to you're getting older, blah blah blah, and now what happens if you have to take care of your parents or one parent or whatever? Or obviously, if you have kids, well, you have kids, but you want to fucking go off and get a motorcycle or an RV or whatever the fuck and live the van life, but well, you have kids, you have families. Do you abandon your kids to go live your dream, or do you like do what you're supposed to do and the right thing, but then inside, because you had this idea of what you thought you wanted to do or what you didn't want to do, whatever, now there's resentment and all this shit. There's that, but then there's also there's a deeper political, and I'm throwing all this shit, I'm just vomiting all this shit out there, but there's also like kind of a right wing, left wing dichotomy too in this film, or the film speaks to it. It doesn't. It's not. It doesn't. The language of right wing, left wing isn't used in the film, but it's like leftists believe that society exists and that investment in society benefits individuals. This is generally right.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas right wingers are like, well, the idea of like the government that governs the best is the government that governs the least. Society the extent that to the extent that it exists is just a collection of individuals, and then by strengthening the individual, then you strengthen whatever that is society. And so maybe the left is like, well, we should invest in we should have like strong government programs to invest in social stuff, and so that we can use high taxation for that, and we need to help the people because that'll make our society better because our society is made up of people and groups working together. Whereas the right will push typically, I mean, and this is where I'm showing my hand here, but it's like you'll have on the right, and obviously the left has their issues and in terms of conformity and all this and policing certain things. Maybe the right they're advocating for low taxation but high military spending, bailing out corporations, giving lip service to individual rights while advocating still for socially conservative policies or social conservative traditional values over individual choices that are outside of the norm. This stuff isn't in the film, but you do have a setup of Potter versus Bailey, and the idea of you can't take what is it? All you can take with you is what you've given away. Um, there's You'll have people that say, well, that sounds like some commie fucking, or nowadays they'll say, well, that sounds like some kind of socialist woke
Not today.
ideology.
Not necessarily just today, because when this film came out in '46, and shortly after,
No, not just today.
well, yeah, but the thing
Oh,
is
for
like
sure. I
the
mean,
the FBI, they put this movie on a list of they tried to suppress it because of the way that Capra had and the screenwriters, Capra being one of the screenwriters, had positioned George Bailey versus Potter as Potter as
Potter.
this industrialist, and it was viewed, or at least it was pushed, as a communist film. And there was a great deal of effort made to suppress the film because, I mean, it's pretty obvious that it's making a statement of a Scrooge character that doesn't give a shit about people, that is intent on building his own wealth, maintaining his own wealth, and growing that wealth at the expense of everybody in this small town. They talk about Potter's slums. They talk about the fact that George Bailey and the Bailey savings and loan that he has inherited from his father and his uncle Billy, he doesn't make money, that he can't.
Against his
Yeah,
wishes, basically.
yeah, that he's yeah, well, yeah, he's taken over that. And I think there's a part of the Bailey character that says, I don't want to. When you see your parents and you see the shit that they put up with, and you tell yourself, I'm never going to be them, I'm never going to do that, there's a little bit of shame in regard to the shit that your parents will put up with in order to make it in this world.
Yeah, and they're doing it for you.
Yeah, that's a big part. The sacrifice of the self in order to, um, in order to provide for your kids, and that's something that you don't understand when you're young. And that's what I love. That's kind of what I love about this film, is that the young George Bailey can't see into the future. He can't, and that's a central theme of. He can't see the forest for the trees. He can't understand that everything around him. I've told some of the people that I've worked with over the past who complain about whatever job that we're working. And I said, what do you expect? What would you want? And inevitably, I hear a lot of people say, well, I wish I could own my own business and be in business for myself. And I said, well, let me get this straight. You don't like having a boss. The biggest problem that you have in this particular job that we're working right now is that you don't like having a boss. You don't like having somebody tell you what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. But you want to be your own boss in a business that you own. Don't you realize that now the public is your boss? And it's everything that they want and expect, and you have to, in some cases, kowtow to that. You have to provide to them. Sometimes you have to eat shit because the bottom line is, am I going to make a profit on this? Because people in a lot of cases are unreasonable. When they have that run on the bank, when they have that scene where there's the run on the bank and people are rushing at them, George is correct in encouraging people to stick it out. If you ride the wave, the boat will turn itself. But if you take everything out, if you're whatever Mr. Johnson and I want my $242. I understand that that's a lot of money to you, but you're going to piss that away. If you wait it out, there is a chance, there is a good chance, not a great chance, but you could lose everything, but you could fight through this. And when Bailey sits down with Potter, with Lionel Barrymore playing the perfect amount of evil in this movie, like a realistic, horrible, fat, old, white, crippled, evil motherfucker. I love that performance. I think it's not overdone. It is exactly who I think that guy is and who he would be and the attitude that he would have and the way he would approach a situation. This beast that's gobbling things up and has no regard for humanity. George looks at him and says, we were the only two ones who kept our heads. I kept the bank open and you became richer. He said something to that effect. Remember that? Where he he was like,
he's in that little chair.
Yeah. Oh, that chair scene is great, isn't it? Where he really was like, oh, this motherfucker put himself higher. There's a reason for this. All that strategy, all that shit. Potter is an evil bastard. But hate to get political, but Potter is Trump. Potter is Buffett. Potter is all of these billionaires.
Potter's corporate.
Yeah. And that's why the FBI went after this film, because anything
Potter is. Mm-hmm. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
Anything that what?
Anything that
it's deeper than that. Potter is capitalism.
And that's what I'm talking about.
It's beyond that.
So Potter represents capitalism in this small town. And to negate that, to show that as purely evil, and to have no nuance to his character, because there is no nuance. He doesn't have a family. You don't show him loving. You don't show him with a wife. You don't even show. I mean, his sole purpose in this film is to gobble this place up. He is a fat old man sitting in a chair, hateful. Maybe he's hateful because God has taken his legs. I don't know. He's a hateful, miserable bastard. And making others miserable, I think, is a big factor in his happiness. It's an offshoot of gaining the wealth. But
yeah, I mean, Go ahead.
No, he could withstand the storm. When you have that much money, and you can swoop in, like my dad used to tell me, whenever there is a horrific event, a 9/11,
yes.
wherever there's a Great Depression, wherever there's an economic downturn, someone will make money.
Yes.
There is that guy who will figure out an angle to take advantage of the situation, whether you're Potter, or your last name is Kennedy, or your last name is fucking Ford, or it's not just being the innovator. It's about being able to have such disregard for humanity as a whole and human beings as to see them as only a number on a spreadsheet. When you're able to put profit above anything else, you are going to do incredibly well financially. What that is for your soul, I don't know. The potter is an evil, and I'm
I
not
mean,
saying,
that's yeah.
I'm not saying heaven or hell. You know my beliefs on that. This guy's not going to pay for anything. And in this movie, Capra got a lot of hate mail in this movie. Do you know that?
I take it because there are no consequences for
There is no
Potter.
consequences for Potter. Potter's Potter doesn't necessarily steal the 8,000, but he doesn't. He knows what he's done. In effect, it is stealing, and it's framing
Yeah,
George Bailey for embezzlement. And there's no payment there. There's no payoff. There's no, I don't know. It's the truth be told, I like it better because if they had if they had the ending that they have, where the town comes together to support George Bailey, to pull him out of this problem, and Potter were to be discovered and go to jail, that would feel tagged on, and
sure.
it would be insulting.
It would be yeah. I mean, because the reality is that, and there's a lot of stuff to touch on what you talked about,
Yeah,
but the reality is that, well, just because people pitched in they put in to come up with $8,000 doesn't mean that those charges against him, like that doesn't mean he didn't potentially steal it.
yeah,
We, the viewers, know that he didn't steal it, but no one in that world knows that he didn't steal it. All they know now is that, like, now there's money. Um, so it's like, who's to say that those like charges wouldn't be dropped? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
or and there's also the aspect of like, well, all these people putting up this money, um, now many of those people are potentially, because they're drawing from their resources. Now some of those people might be in a deficit, and so we talk about, or this film talks about positive effects. Um, well, what about negative effects?
yeah.
What about by pitching in to help him? What now are some of the negative things that would have happened? You know what I mean? Like, there's that. The the whole idea of the running on the bank, the panic. Um, it's like the market. It's perception, right? Um, if everyone's worried that there's going to be this financial situation, they want to go get their money out of the bank because they want cash on hand. Um, the Potters of the world can take advantage because when there's a situation and people want money or they need money on hand, people will sell things. They're going out of business, whatever it is, they're going to sell, but they'll sell for much cheaper because they need the money sooner because they don't have the liquid, they don't have actual cash. So these people who have all of this cash can go in and fucking buy up. Or when businesses when it's the whole thing of like competition creates monopoly. Because as soon as you can take over your competition, your competition goes under, you can buy now. You can buy their business, basically. You can take over their business because you're taking over their share of the market of the customers that they were appealing to, that they got to the tipping point where they could no longer sustain their business. You can take their employees, you can take their means of production, you can take all that, and then slowly you start to build and build and build, and then eventually you become one of these big fucking Microsofts or whatever the fuck it is. And even if it's not monopoly, it's oligopoly or whatever. It's you have your iPhone and you have your fucking Samsung, or
Yeah.
your the other big one.
Show
Or
me
you
the
have your
choice.
Pepsi
Yeah. Or yeah.
and you have your Coke, and it's like, well, now it's and then now then you go on and what do? You start expanding, and then okay, now I'm gonna buy Disney or whatever these companies are that own fucking multiple shit. Um, there's that aspect. The idea of what you're saying about when you're telling these people um, to not that when you're giving them a different perspective on the be your own boss thing, um, and it's like, well, the world is your boss. I get that, but that's not exactly, I think, what they that's not what they're talking about. I think they're talking about it's like if, for example, on a super micro scale, like this is we are the bosses of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
No one tells us to no one tells us what to talk about. No one tells us for how long, what to say, whatever. All we have is like, um, according to this type of this economic bullshit, like it's the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the we don't work at the behest of people who are paying us to they're sponsoring us and they're like, well, you need to talk about our fucking, Joe Rogan used to have those fucking sex toys that whatever that thing that you would masturbate in, whatever it's called, the
Yeah.
fleshlight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so you have to bring that up at some point. And now I just gave them a fucking free promo. Even if that thing still exists or not, I have no idea. Whatever, or whatever it is that your thing is. It was some video store
Mm-hmm.
in fucking Tacoma, Washington, right? Um, we don't have that. So we don't have commercials. We don't fucking like nothing. We talk about whatever we want. We get the downloads we get. If people want to donate coffee to us, buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos. They want to fucking do that. They can do it. We can be influenced by the films certain films, more people are going to like them. They're going to get more downloads. I mean, that also has to do with like the marketing aspect, but like, um, uh, even the coffee thing, like certain people, they're showing the market is saying, well, yeah, we like this. So then we can change our strategy if we wanted to completely like shift over to get more views or more downloads or whatever. We could put on some cam girl with big tits and we can turn it into a video thing and then she can like whatever. We can have her not talk at all because that is a thing too. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been a thing. Um, and we would get plenty of um, views for that. Um, but the difference is like when this person wants to be their own boss, if they want to open up a fucking record store, or no, they want to open up a coffee shop or a bar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, their customers and the market affect the supply and the demand, right? So if there's a big demand for what they do, they'll, but that person is not telling them when to open. They can tell you, they can do however many of their hours. It's like a conversation with the public, but it's not like you have to fucking do this.
Yeah.
Um, but at this point in our society, like everyone is required. Byung Chul Han talks about everyone being an achievement subject at this point. Um, where we are in late capitalism is like with this idea that everything that you do is for the purposes of production, for the purposes of value. How much value do you produce in the world? How much value do you yourself have? Um, on a high level, it's top tier. Like, what are your assets, right? What is your net worth? What are your assets? For the middle class, it's like, what is what your house or your toys or your annual salary. Whereas for the working bottom class, it's like, well, how much do you make an hour? Is like the yardstick, right? Um, but everything is monetized to how many downloads, how many copies are bought. Does your podcast make money? Oh, side hustle, hustle culture, rise and grind, Gary Vaynerchuk, hustle, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yeah.
How
Fake it till
productive
you
are
make
you?
it,
What's
all
your
that
value?
shit. Yeah.
All of that. And if you can't show those metrics, because it's all about that. Everything is a fucking investment of your time into creating something. You're always being sold something, and you're always. It's like, well, what do you do? What do you produce? What do you? We're all little entrepreneurs
Yeah.
in society, and we're all these little capitalists. Um, and like going back to we were talking about the 40s, and I was saying like nowadays they would call it. They would say that it's this woke, because they lump all these fucking things together. So they would say it's this. Jordan Peterson would say, "Oh, this fucking postmodernist, bloody Marxist, socialist, blah 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 blah." Word salad that doesn't even like go together. But think about fucking like you said, like in the 40s, post-war, around the time that this film is coming out, you have like economic theorist Frederick Hayek. He wrote this book called The Road to Serfdom. That's deeply influential to libertarians, and that section of or that segment of the right, even though like libertarians will say, well, a lot of times they're more like socially liberal, like in terms of, or they'll say they're classically liberal. That's a different thing, but like socially liberal in terms of like not evangelical Christian values, like do whatever the fuck you want, but stay out of other people's way type of thing.
Yeah.
But maybe fiscally conservative. Ayn Rand wrote The Fountainhead. 2 or 3 years around the time of this film.
Let me ask you something real
This
quick.
idea of this.
No.
Huh?
Let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever read The
Yeah.
Fountainhead?
Yeah, I have a copy of it.
Okay. Well, I got a copy of a lot of books that I've never read. You're better than
I
me.
mean, I
But
have someone
no.
working on two. That's a good point. Yeah.
But have you read it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Yes.
it's a book. It's an incredibly polarizing book. It's a book that, at least for people who read and read once upon a time ago, it was an incredibly influential book. I'm not really sure what it is or what it's about, or I know it has something to do with business, and it's a I think it's like a right wing kind of thing. But can you go
Well,
into a little bit
yeah.
of, because I think the book itself and referencing the book, not just in this episode, but culturally, I don't think enough people know what the book is, what it's really about, and why it either why people use it as a platform and why people attack it as much as they do.
I mean, like you can look. Yeah, I can do that. There's an appeal to it because it's written to be appealing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's parts of it that are fucking. I mean, it's super long winded. It has all these fucking speeches. It has all this like, and by the way, it also influenced the Church of Satan.
Okay.
Anton Zender LaVey, like, even to a level, described his own shit as like Ayn Rand's objectivism with ritual attached to it. So The Fountainhead is about a character named Howard Rourke, and Howard Rourke is a student of architecture, and he's at school, and he's not doing well in school because he doesn't conform to the standards of the architecture program at his college. So he knows how to do. He learned everything that they have to teach, but all his drawings are these modern buildings of his own design. He won't do anything in like these older styles that the way they want him to. And he's contrasted to another character who is like subpar, and he does that guy's work for him. Like he always does his schoolwork and all this shit. And so Howard Rourke right away is this rebellious character. He gets kicked out of school. He doesn't give a fuck. He goes to um, be mentored by this struggling architect who Howard Rourke looks up to, and he struggles and he works under him, and it's basically the book is all about Howard Rourke doing Howard Rourke in the face of everyone else saying like, how dare he fucking do his shit? This is how you're supposed to do things. And throughout the course of the book, you have these Ellsworth Tooley, I think is the character's name. These people who are critics of him and critics of his work, they attack him, they try to undermine him. Even his love interest, who he rapes.
Wow. Okay.
He, I mean, this is. There's a crazy scene where and it's kind of in its own way, it's like steamy, the way that she describes it, because Ayn Rand escaped communism in Russia,
Mm-hmm.
and so comes here talking about like it's all about the individual, it's not about the collective, it's not about the group, and so even like he's even to work willing he works the quarries, he does manual labor to create his vision. This woman Dominique, um, who becomes his love interest at one point, it's like they have this hot fucking like steamy fucking romance novel tension between them, and one day when he's going to install this whatever kind of stone, he rapes her and she fights, but he rapes her, and but she wanted it because she sensed, according to this book, she sensed like um, this power of this rugged individualist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so because she wants him, but because of also the way the story goes, she sets out to fucking destroy him as well, and nothing will stop him. And I don't know if it's from Atlas Shrugged or it's from which is another
Ayn Rand.
another one of her main books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these are the two main books. Or I don't know if it's from something else, but it's kind of like the question is not, and I'm super paraphrasing her. It's like, um, it's the question is not who will allow me, it's who will stop me, or something like that. So ultimately, it's what happens between Howard Rourke and Dominique,
Mm-hmm.
and who's also a strong personality, and it's all these strong personalities clashing, but in the end, the individual making fucking rational decisions in a rational world of self-interest, he's the one that prevails. And so that idea is influential. And I mean, a lot of these podcasters, a lot of these kind of voices over the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years, kind of have some of that. Maybe they don't talk about that, but they'll talk about libertarianism, or they'll talk about like, the government should just get the fuck out of our way and let's just all do our thing. And obviously that's very appealing. Let's just all do our thing.
Yeah.
Can't we all just be these characters that we see in the movies that do whatever the fuck they want, and they are willing to pay for it too?
Well, that's the
And
problem. Not
people actually go
always.
against it.
So
No, but that's the thing.
mm-hmm.
But that's the reality is that like Howard Rourke, you can see Howard, you can put Donald Trump, the reality,
Yeah.
into the fountainhead, and then you see a completely different It's like, how many of these people are really self-made? How many of these people are really these
Mm-hmm.
rugged individualists? How many of these people, or are they fucking colluding with each other to fucking achieve their aims?
Mm-hmm.
And except for the rape part, you see these differences. The rape part is like, okay, this Dominique in the book, she wants it,
Well,
you
you
know.
brought up Donald Trump, so the rape part was kind of, par for the course on that. So, I mean,
Well, that was already settled,
yeah,
Um,
one of them
that's
was.
been settled in court. We have right. So it's the idea of like a productive, self-interested, self-directed, strong, motivated um, individual who that's the ideal. That's the ideal of, even though Ayn Rand and her objectivists say that there are differences between themselves and libertarians, um, that's their ideal versus the freeloader, the conformist, the weak, the lazy. Um, that's how they describe. Uh, and then you have like racialist stuff in there, and then you have all this other shit, and it's like there's no already. A lot of times, people are able to have more freedom of movement and freedom of choice because they're already coming in from places of privilege. Um, if you're if you have some kind of disability, you can only work within the range of motion and limitations that you live in the society that you live in, the physical uh, limitations that you have, whatever. So yeah, you can fucking do what you can do within that. But it's like if the world is full of stairs and you're in a wheelchair, like you're fucked.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, like, okay, well, now you can pay someone to carry you up the stairs because that's how it works. Because you have to do that. Well, if they don't fucking, you know what I mean? If everyone's charged, it's this thing. So the George Baileys of the world will help someone. The Potters of the world will say, well, what's it to me to fucking help you? How does it benefit me? I saw a thing where one of these guys from, I don't know if he was from Reason magazine or one of these libertarian, I don't remember his name right now. He's from one of these libertarian kind of groups. Talks about how kids are encouraged to share. Um,
What do you mean? Objects,
and
material objects, or feelings?
like to share toys,
Okay. Yeah.
or or food or whatever, like lunch or
Sure.
whatever kind of
Yeah.
shit. Um, and he's like, well, why aren't they being taught to trade? Um, and I mean, okay, good point. I mean, I think kids already actually like that. That goes back to the question: is like, are there more George Baileys or Potters, or how does that work? Because it's like, I mean, like when I'm pretty sure kids they do share. Hey, you want some?
Mm-hmm.
Um, or oh, like here, I'll give you some of mine, give me some of yours, blah blah. I'll show you mine, you show me yours, blah blah.
Yeah.
I just took it there, but it's also like the fucking libertarian thing and all that. It's like it's not only trade, it's fucking they would sell. It's all about like it. Everything becomes about commerce. Everything becomes about the market. Once you do that, it's like there is a diminishing of the world because not everything is quantifiable. Not everything is can come down to the bottom line. Not everything can be set in those terms. Not everything is a zero sum game. Things, yeah, this idea of like things that are supposedly like priceless that can be very very simple, um, but to others it's like okay, a walk on the beach, or you look at the Grand Canyon and then someone else is going to say, a real estate developer is going to say, the Grand fucking Canyon, do you know what I could build there?
Yeah. You know what I could build into
The
those
fucking
walls?
Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh?
Or like
Yeah.
the kind of apartments that I could build into those walls, into those cliffs. People would kill for that. The Amazon, yeah. I mean,
It's the lawyer from Jurassic Park.
yeah.
It's like it's exactly that. Um, and the ramifications are Jurassic Park level, um, where it's like all the shit that we're doing in this system is unsustainable. And but then you look at when George Bailey, when he goes through this alternate reality,
Hmm.
and he's in fucking Potterville or whatever the fuck, um, and then he was like, oh shit, um, that shit was like Times Square,
Well,
um,
what was great is like the power of this movie is so
like
incredible.
old Times Square.
Oh yeah. Well, the power of this movie is such that 30 years later, Zemeckis and Gale would rob it blatantly in Back to the Future 2, where George Bailey, what what was George McFly, that's a weird connection there. George McFly had been murdered, didn't exist. Biff takes over, and all of Hill Valley turns into Biff Land.
Trump Tower, yeah.
Yeah, Trump Tower, and that's directly pulled out of this. So you have a casino where you had nightclubs over there. You know, you have decadence. You have strip clubs. They had strip clubs in Potterville. I mean, it's the idea that if you allow business to run rampant, that business doesn't give a shit about you and doesn't care about the community. Yes, it cares about the individual. It cares about the individual who owns it, operates it, and profits from it. But the rest of us are going to be stuck living in hovels, going to be living in slums. George Bailey is an outlier. He's never going to become rich. He's only going to be able to provide for people. Maybe his life will be taken care of to a degree, but he's never going to be comfortable. He's going to be scraping by. If you're okay with that, then at the end of the day, you can justify anything to yourself. There's that moment, and I think it's really well played, where Lionel Barrymore offers him something like a $20,000 annual salary, and I looked that up, and it was kind of crazy because at the time, the 8,000. Okay, so first of all, the 8,000 that Uncle Billy misplaces, that's about 115,000 in today's money.
Really?
Yeah, this is what
That's crazy.
IMDb says. Yeah, so it's like you could lose that much, you know. Potter offers George a job with an annual salary. It's about 46,000 in 2020. Um, the what George is making is about 46,000. Potter offers him 20,000, which is almost 370,000, which means he'd be making about $1 million for the 3-year contract. And you can see it hitting Jimmy Stewart. You can see it hitting George.
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of I've been busting my ass so long, I deserve this now. He gets pulled in by this lucrative offer. But then he realizes, and I don't think it's far fetched. I don't think it's too heavy handed. He realizes I would be making a deal with the devil. This man does not have my interest. He's buying me. I will not allow that. I will not be his shill. I will suffer, but at the end of the day, I will be able to respect myself. I've told this story in the past where when I guess I was getting out of college, and my dad had I think he had about 30 years at the post office by that point. And I remember asking him one point, after I had jobs and I had worked real jobs and I had seen managers and supervisors and I saw how business worked more from a from a grunt's perspective and the potential to move up in a job. And you and I have talked about this a little bit. But I asked him, why didn't you ever become a supervisor? Why didn't you ever become a manager? You would have made more money and we would have been better off. And he looked at me and he said, I did it. He said, number one, did you ever want for anything? We weren't rich. We were working class, blue collar people, but we had what we needed. Food on the table, clothes on our back. I had a car, a broken down used car, but it was my car. I went to college, and there was never a question of whether or not we were going to pay for this or not. Boom. He said, I did that on a mail handler's salary. I did that on a grunt's salary. If I had become a supervisor or a manager, I would have had to tell guys on the crew, guys that I worked with, to do a job in a way that I knew they shouldn't be asked to do it. I would have been forced to put on unrealistic expectations. Oh, this is a 5-man job and 2 guys are out sick and one of our people is on light duty. We're going to have to step it up. That's bullshit. He's like, I provided and I didn't have to compromise. If we didn't have as much money, we still were able to live decently. George Bailey realizes that very thing at that moment. I'm not going to compromise and sell my soul. And it's even grander because he knows who he's dealing with, and it all of a sudden comes to the realization of what I would have to do in order to make that money. I would be a manager of this man's slums. I would betray everything that I believe in, and I would no longer be able to live my life. Now, this film is a suicide story. It's a suicide redemption story because he realizes I'm worth more dead than alive, or at least he believes that.
Mm-hmm.
But being shown what life would have been like without him, without that butterfly effect of saving his brother, and his brother in turn saving those paratroopers, Mary becoming an old maid, Mr. Gower reeling from the death of his son from influenza, the Spanish flu at that time, realizing that this man would have killed a young boy out of his grief and out of his, he affected so many people. He affected so much. And that's what, that's all of us. I don't know how good a man I am. I hope that I helped a few people in this life. And I know I made things worse for a couple of people. But if you look at it, you know what I mean? If you look at your life and you look at the people that have come in and out of your life, and you look at how people have affected you, I think that's the beauty of this film, is that so often in life we look at it from a myopic vision where we cannot see past what we see. We can only see directly what's in front of us. It's a Wonderful Life opens up that vision and makes you realize that there are people that have affected you, and there are people that you are going to affect and have affected. And the beauty of it is knowing that, for the most part, the world, your world at least, is a better place. It's a better fucking place for you showing a little bit of kindness here and there. This movie gets to me. This movie fucking, I teared up. I really, and I don't, how many times have I seen this fucking movie? And we've talked about this movie, and I teared up the last time. And I know I'm going to watch it again in a couple of years, and it's going to fucking hit me again, and maybe it's going to be worse. I don't know. I hope to God that I don't ever get to the point where I say, this movie's fucking bullshit. He's a fucking chump. He's a fucking, fuck him. Fuck George Bailey and his ideals.
Fuck George Bailey and fuck Rocky, right?
Yeah. Mickey Mantle never paid my rent. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But look, it's like
Yeah.
Gary V says like, yeah, but if George Bailey would have just like had Potter's like entrepreneurial spirit,
Yeah.
then he could have like worked harder and he could have bought up everything and he could have owned everything.
Mhm.
And then,
No,
you
he's
know,
not.
and then if the people would have fucking worked harder, then they could like all benefit because like he wouldn't have to carry them. They could all work hard, you know, and blah 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 blah. But like, you know, fractional reserve banking is the bank fucking loans out more money than is actually back in real cash, right?
Yeah.
So that there, because the bank started with like, okay, this is gold that we're carrying around, right? And now I'm gonna take it to the blacksmith who has the safe or whatever the fuck it is, um and then he gives me a paper that says how much I have with him, right?
Yeah.
But it's all give and take. So it's all like, well, the bank charges you to keep its money, to keep your money. The
Yeah.
bank charges you to keep your money with them, and they guarantee your well. Before it used to be backed by gold, no more. But uh, and they borrow, they loan your money to other people, but they loan more than is in the bank. And so it's like it's not balanced. There's more promised than there is backed. And George Bailey sees that with Potter, that there's more promise than what's just at that bottom line, because there always is. And so when George Bailey goes through Pottersville or whatever, Potterville, and he sees, you know, in this film, this idea of like, okay, these gambling houses and strip clubs and all that stuff, that's also it's to show that this is an immoral, it's become an
Hmm.
immoral place, and it's all just
Greed.
it's just greed.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you can think about, um, I mean, slavery is also that too. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because it's like, well, um, but I think there's a big leap between houses of slavery where you can buy people, versus a strip club. Which I mean, obviously, someone can say, well, a house of prostitution, and you can get into like, is this like the sex trafficking and sex trade, and like what level is what, whatever. Um, but I don't even think that Pottersville is that it becomes strip clubs and gambling houses and all that shit. I don't necessarily think it
No,
becomes that, even
that's
though
extreme for
there's a
this. Yeah.
Deadwood aspect to that,
Hmm.
and Deadwood has that where it's like, who's trying to control what on that fucking land, and then the big guy from outside comes in and blah blah blah. That is very Deadwood.
Yeah.
Ultimately, no. Pottersville becomes fucking look outside. Look out fucking side.
Yeah.
Look outside your window. Drive wherever you go to. If you have a car, or if not, go to the bus stop and go to that fucking where you get your gas or you catch your bus or you do whatever, and you see those mini malls that fucking George Carlin talked about. And when you don't have mini malls, you have mini marts and
Hmm.
all that. That joke.
Yeah.
Um, that's fucking Potterville.
Yeah.
Like that's where we live. I don't even remember what's the name of his town. Um,
Bedford
the
Falls.
George Bailey's.
Bedford
Yeah, that's
Falls. Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
Bedford Falls is gone.
Hmm.
We live in Potterville. And you know, public funding and all that shit, like for the arts and for and you know, PBS. I used to like to watch PBS, and
Hmm.
you get some kind of sense of like culture, and artists are supported, and people have a sense of, or you go to other countries and they spend money on having like fountains and fucking, if the you know, if they have money.
Yeah.
Um, and there's like cultural vibrancy, and even if the country is poor compared to, I mean, obviously compared to U.S. standards of fucking wealth and all that bullshit, but like, you know what I mean? Like, there's
Hmm.
a sense of like, you see beauty, and obviously beauty is a subjective term, but you see beauty built in. There's an aesthetic quality built into the city. Um, no, it's of no value. Why are we spending money on that? Um, to the point where it's like everything should be fucking privatized. So that prisons are privatized. Everything is fucking privatized. And now it's like, well, we make money by locking people up. And oh, you're sick.
Hmm.
Um, you're do you have money? You're
Yeah.
hungry? Do you have money? Do you this? Do you have money? Yeah, do you have money? Get a job. Get a fucking job. You lazy fuck. I had a
So
job, but I lost my job. I got laid off. So what? There's only one job. There's only one fucking the owner guy owns everything in town. There's only one boss. Get a job.
yeah,
And if you don't like it, look, we have the freedom. This is a free country. You have the freedom now. You can move to another community to fucking to do it. That's the thing. If you don't like it, go somewhere else
yeah.
and try that. Well,
How
now I
can
go to the other with the other boss, that town's boss, and
how
but
can you do
then
it when
this
that's
town
become the
buys that
standard?
town,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
and and I mean, it shows what can fucking happen, and this is just corporate fucking shit like left and right, and that's the tension of, and whether you believe in anything that we've been saying or not, whether you're like, oh, you guys are full of shit, you guys don't understand.
And that's possible,
So
but I mean, if you're an observer of human nature and you can see what power and wealth will do to a person. You brought up the idea of somebody saying that George Bailey should have taken the job with Potter, and then basically, I mean, this is what I got out of it. The old adage of make change from within, gain the power, gain the position, and then change from within. But that doesn't work because what ends up happening is you become Michael Corleone. You become corrupted by the position that you're in. Oh, we're going to go straight. In 5 years, the Corleone family is going to be completely legitimate. It will never be. You will never be completely legitimate. You once you have made that deal to compromise what you believe in, you will constantly go back to it because in your head you're justifying it. That might be a simplistic, naive way of looking at it, but I believe that I think that when you have when you have rationalized something to yourself and it makes sense to you, that's just a slope that you can't climb back up to. You can no longer become the idealistic person that you once were. Because number one, it's going to be thrown in your face from the outside, but it's also going to be something that you've justified from the inside. George Bailey never would have been able to do that. At that and that's the beauty of this film, I think, is that it's to a degree. Yes, it's an exaggeration, and you're perfectly right in the statement of Potterville wouldn't have become this 70s Times Square in the 40s. Um, but it would have definitely I think the film reflects who we are and what culture is, and us as the populace becoming slave like to the corporation. I mean, there's a point where you say, well, slave and master, that becomes something that's thrown around. It's like calling somebody the new Hitler, or
yeah,
that kind of thing. It's overused. It's an overused analogy, and I think that's true to a degree. But there is a point
But it's
where you,
deeper than that.
but it is deeper than that. And it's the point where you find yourself being abused at a job that you have to take because you have to put food on the table. You have to keep a roof over your head and you have to provide. Um, does that
Yeah,
mean
but
that,
the thing is, that,
mm,
go ahead. Does that mean
no,
what?
I said, does it mean that the corporation is not taking advantage of you to a degree? Yeah. In many cases,
But
yeah.
the deeper aspect is that the corporation itself is a slave.
Yes.
The corporation has no alternative. There's no other game in town. Mark Fisher, who ultimately committed suicide, among other things, wrote Capitalist Realism. Like, there's no his thing is that um, there is no other way. There is no at this point like it's just capitalism.
Well,
And so the system itself is a slave to itself. That's that's like the bleak.
hmm
Um, that's the bleak thing about it. It is like the corporations. Everyone has to. Everyone is forced into these behaviors
yeah.
because the system is built that way, and there are no alternatives. It is what it is. We're just all suffering. Um, and obviously, there are people that are benefiting from it. And look, like you and I have the free time right now to
hmm
have this conversation. And the people listening to us, whether they're working while they listen or whatever the fuck they're doing, like, and we have the luxury of having the technology and the resources based on someone else's fucking like digging through mines and all this other
hmm
shit to have these phones and to do all this, right? Um, but regardless of where you are on that fucking scale, um, we are all numbers. You know, we're just another brick in the wall, man. You know, like
Yeah.
Roger Waters. Like that's what it is.
hmm
Um, and you can argue. Some people can argue, well, you know, Pottersville will. He's just gonna. It's whatever the people want. That's what he's gonna build. Um, and that's what they're gonna spend their money on. But it's like this is part of that story of like there's that where it's like, well, the demand, there's the supply and demand, right? If there's no demand for something, either it disappears, um, or it gets so cheap that people will still be willing to buy it, or whatever. But there's also, you know, Steve Jobs is like, motherfuckers don't know what they want, you know,
Yeah.
like, um, and then built into our phones and all this shit is all this addictive like programming to get us to. I mean, that's probably why it's like that's the point of not only the social aspect where it's a critique of these gambling houses and like on a social level where it's like bars and strip clubs and casinos and to show how illicit the community is. Um, but it's also like, well, these are the things that are going to get people to continue to spend their fucking money, um, especially when there's no fucking alternative. Like, um,
hmm
if you're gonna put a fucking liquor store like and you're having like people are gonna fucking buy the thing, you know what I mean? And that's not to say to not have those things. Because we're not coming from a place of some kind of socially conservative kind of like, oh well, you know, a strip club is bad and blah blah
No.
blah. And aside from those questions of like, you know, there's pro sex feminism type of thing too, where it's like, well, okay, pornography can be either seen as fucking it can be seen as there's a supply and demand for it. People want it. There's a market for pornography. Some people can say that it's just fucking exploitation primarily women. Some people can say, well, yes, it has those qualities, but at the same time, like, not everyone who is in porn because they have no choice but to be in it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are making rational choices, and they do enjoy that work and they do want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the other side is like, well, yeah, look at the fucking suicide and death rates and all that stuff like that. It's all in that pot together. But this film has those outlooks and those conversations built into it. People can look at it from these different perspectives. Someone who's a progressive can look and say, well, yeah, look at the fucking, like, if we just focus on community and services and etc. The New Deal, FDR, fucking, like, these things that we take for granted, Social Security, which will be insolvent, like, by the time that we would have pretended that we would stop working. Social Security is a social fucking program. Republicans will fucking tell you it's fucking socialist. It is socialist, but they'll say it's communist. They'll say it's fucking, they'll say it's fascist because they'll throw that out there. The 8-hour workday, things that we take for granted, that unions and different people had to fight for. That now in some states they're fucking with like limitations on minors working, so that, like, fucking put the 6-year-old back in the coal mine. He fits. Why not? Why the fuck not?
There's a lot of
Burn
hours
that
to a
fucking
day,
coal.
It's a lot of hours to a day.
There's a lot of fucking hours to a day. Rise and grind, motherfucker. Like, be your own boss, man.
Yeah.
Work now. This is Gary Vaynerchuk. Is like, work till you're like 30, whatever the fuck he says. And some Gary V probably, I mean, I don't know how many people are listening to him that are listening to us, but there are enough people that listen to enough shit that someone's going to be able to probably correct me on it. But something along the lines of, I don't know if you know who Gary V is.
I'm not familiar with him.
He's this one of these internet gurus, and he started with a wine business, because his parents had already like a wine business, and he took it and he made it bigger, and then he became this thing, and now he's doing those NFTs, and he has this fucking, like, these people follow him, and he's very popular, and he's like these Grant Cardones and all these people that are like, you need to hustle, man, you need to fucking, like, blah blah blah. And there's a new guy out there, like, when you see him on Instagram, like, if you want to be a salesman like me, like, you need to fucking have abs. Otherwise, if you don't have a six-pack, you're not committed to it. Like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I, like, nah, man, there ain't no pussy shit over here. But we got to, blah, blah, right? The point is like, work till you're fucking grind, fucking till you're whatever age, so you can, like, you can build your empire. And then you can back off or whatever, and it's like, okay, dude. Opposite end of fucking, like, Tim Ferriss 15 years ago or whatever, however fucking long ago it was, with the 4-hour work week, where it's like, well, I'm gonna learn to fucking leverage shit, so it's like, I'm gonna outsource my work to some motherfucker in India or in the Philippines. That way I can pay them shit and they can do my work from over there, and so I don't have to do my work.
Sounds
and
remarkably like a pyramid scheme in a weird way.
I mean, well, then that's you get those Patrick Bet-Davids and those fucking guys that are like, it's all of that, and all those gurus are selling. I mean, every time you fucking open Instagram, it's somebody selling you something.
Of course.
And I mean, it's they're telling you what you should eat, or how this, or my fucking diet, or my this and that. Look, we're selling our fucking. What are we selling?
We're selling our thoughts and ideas.
I'm playing you.
Yeah.
We're playing. No, we're not even a yes, but at the same time, it's like, look, like, we're on the street corner fucking playing you a song because we love it.
Yeah.
Um, and if you want to throw some fucking, brother, can you spare a dime? Brother, can you spare a dime? Like if you throw fucking few things in the fucking hat on
Mhm.
the guitar case, thank you. You and I are not gonna fucking like live doing this.
Well, that's the thing. When you brought it
Like,
up, it's like the comparison is like, you and I are not beholden to anybody that's listening. This is a conversation that you and I would be having, not necessarily the same way. There is a difference in what we do on this episode, but this is the conversation. And originally, it was this idea of two people talking and giving their thoughts on a film and how that film reflects on culture as a whole, pop culture, historical culture, artistic culture, all of that, how it all plays into that. Um, we're not beholden to the public. If they want to listen, great. If they want to donate, great. At the end of the day, though, you're right. Um, we are not limited by what we expect people are going to like. And even on those episodes that were like, oh, let's do some heavy hitters, let's do something that we think is going to get more listeners. There's still films that we want to talk about. And when we do a special episode, there's validity in Rocky culturally. There's validity in Popeye culturally, um, culturally and
this
artistically, and there's an incredible validity to this film. So what we are doing is just talking about something that we care about. You can't say that about everything on Instagram where it's monetized in every there are podcasts out there that every 15 minutes it's, hey, let's cut to the commercial. This corporate sponsor, this one does for
and they
us,
have
this
no
one does,
choice.
yeah, and they have no choice. It's like they want to make that money.
I mean they do, but it's like, yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. But the thing is, you and I both
It's
have jobs. We're chasing something else, and we're the I don't mean to play us as greater than what we are, but we're the George Baileys. We're doing what we have to do because we love it, and we're providing it for people to listen to. And if they want to support, that's great. And if they don't want to support, I understand. And if they can't support, hey, I get that too. Um, it's a beautiful thing though, because at the end of the day, no matter how bad my week is, no matter how hard it is to muscle through the job, I know that at one point I'm going to sit on the phone with a friend talking about something that I really care about, and I'm going to hear his opinions, and we're going to get that shit out there, and maybe it affects somebody to the point where they say, I had no there have been a number of times, and I've been so grateful for people who hit me up at gondoramos@yahoo.com. My personal email. I don't always respond, but I love the fact that they say, I didn't look at the film that way. I hadn't taken that perspective. Here's my perspective. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting angle. Or I'm glad that you brought this film to my attention. The very fact that we sat down one day and you had never seen The War Room. What was the fucking incest movie that we saw? The Ray Winstone,
oh
The War Zone.
yeah, the war zone, yeah.
Now I'm not proud of the way that affected either of us, but I'm so glad that we saw the film. And a friend of mine saw it and said, I didn't know that this film existed.
Right, yeah.
And it's an incredible film. You made me aware of, and I had never heard of The Exiles. The Exiles just arrived to me on a Blu-ray. I'm getting ready to watch
the
that.
the downtown film,
Yeah, the
the
downtown, the natives in Los
yeah.
Angeles. I'm really looking forward to that. Um, we've discovered things. We've found that the world. There are thousands of movies that we will never get to, but the fact that we've gotten to the ones that we have gotten to, the fact that we've rewatched things with a different attitude, we've seen new things that we never would have seen. whether we enjoyed the film or disliked the film, I always feel like the conversation was worth it. The conversation was worth the viewing. I've never
Yeah.
been disappointed by a conversation that you and I have had. Now, whether the listening audience has been disappointed, I don't know. But I think you and I have taken a lot from what we've watched, listening to each other. You listening to my opinion, my listening to your opinion, and then each of us listening to what we have to say. Because sometimes, in the moment, a movie hits me in a different way upon reflection. There are moments when
Yeah.
I've walked
Yeah, of
away from
course.
this podcast. Yeah, there are moments when I've walked away from this podcast thinking, "God damn, I didn't realize that the movie meant that to me." I'm thankful for this time, and I think George Bailey. I don't think it's too. I know it's fiction. I know it's a story, and I know it's designed to tug at the heartstrings. But I like to believe that there are a few people out there that are fighting the good fight and are trying to make life a little bit better for those around them. I believe that.
Yeah.
As
Yeah, I
cynical
mean,
as
yeah, I mean, I live with a woman who's that kind of person. She's actually a good fucking person.
yeah,
Um,
she is.
that's very strange. Um,
But it's a balancing
we're
act.
we're approaching,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because I mean, it has to be a balancing act when you're living with this, you know. Um, uh, we're approaching our 500th episode.
Yeah.
Well, no, well, the podcast is approaching its 500th
Mm-hmm.
episode. I haven't done 500 with you, but I've been along for the ride. So we will be talking about stuff that we've done. We will be looking
Mm-hmm.
back, but we're also going to be looking forward. In the future, we're gonna revisit some of the stuff that we talked about earlier and give it a different perspective. You know, a fucking 10-year perspective.
Yeah.
Which will affect those things. We pretty soon are gonna we're gonna hit up those of you who have donated. Uh, as I've said before, what we've been doing is like those who donate the most consistently or at the highest level, both.
Yeah.
As a way of like, look, thanks. We thank everyone, but it's within this fucking capitalist realist fucking system. Like, you guys are competing. Otherwise, you're worthless. What are you worth? What's your value? What are you worth to us? Get a job. So anyway, so fucking
Get a job.
So it's like we'll be hitting up some of you guys and gals, and saying like, hey, well, what do you want to hear us talk about? If we've talked about it and you're not familiar with it, we'll guide you to that episode. If you want to hear it and we haven't talked about it, then you will guide us through that episode. Until then, we're gonna fucking continue to give ourselves the opportunity to be disagreed with, to be wrong, to be preachy, to be inspired, to tear up, to fucking be cynical, to be greedy, to be exploitative, to be all of those fucking things that go into what the fuck we are as humans. We're gonna continue to watch shit, and you're gonna watch shit with us.
Well said. buymeacoffee.com/watch this with Watch Rick Ramos. buymeacoffee.com/watch Rick Ramos. You can donate whatever you feel like donating, and it will be appreciated. We're just gonna keep on. We're just gonna keep on moving forward with this adventure. We hope that you. We hope that you continue to join with us. Let other people know. Hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, and just try to be there for us because we're trying to be there for you. Thank you so much, and
Yeah.
we'll talk again.
Or
Real
don't
soon.
donate at all.
Or
Or
don't.
don't donate.
Or don't.
You know, the irony. The irony of asking for money after this episode. It's what it is.
Well, we kind of want to be the richest man in town, so we're working on whatever we can. Thank you so much, folks. Be good.